I consider it necessary to make a long overdue decision to immediately recognize the independence and sovereignty of the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic.
Shortly after Putin's announcement, the UN Security Council convened an urgent session.
The Secretary General considers the decision of the Russian Federation to be a violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine and inconsistent with the principles of the Charter of the United Nations.
In its first response, the White House said the US president ordered limited sanctions on those two regions of Ukraine and prohibited any investment, trade, or financing by Americans to these areas. Later in the day, Putin signed a decree ordering troops into two regions of eastern Ukraine where the Russian military has had a presence since 2014, stating that those leaders had asked him to intervene.
Twice, the government in Kiev carried out punitive military operations on that territory, and it seems as though there is now a third peak in military tensions in this region.
Stop combat activity, he said. Otherwise, the responsibility for continuing the bloodshed will lay on the shoulders of the Ukrainian regime.
Despite rejecting President Zelensky's calls for the immediate imposition of sanctions on Russia, the EU issued a stern warning that continuing on its current path may cost Russia a prosperous future.
If the Kremlin strikes, we can impose high costs and severe consequences on Moscow's economic interests.
We will continue to assess what Russia does overnight. We are going to be imposing significant sanctions on Russia tomorrow.
These are going to be crippling sanctions, sanctions the likes of which we have not put in place before. They're going to be unprecedented.
It seems the initial reasons behind the recent flare-up of tensions between Russia and the West have fallen under the radar.
The problems with Russia are not just NATO expansion. There were also a process of withdrawing from almost all of the arms control agreements, the very agreements that had brought the first Cold War to an end. And there was a decided direct intrusion into the domestic politics of these newly independent countries. Attempts to directly to change the government. There were three purposes of NATO to begin with. NATO was to keep the Russians out, to keep the Germans down, to keep the Americans in.
There is so much rhetoric right now and so many counter-allegations, it is not possible to really know what is happening. But stepping back to reflect on the situation, one can't help but conclude that the narrative that war is imminent is in fact quite weak. While Russia already has the means for an invasion, it doesn't really have any motive. If Putin takes the decision to invade, he will lose all negotiating power he has leveraged by the build-up of troops along the border. Liaquat Tobias for CI Radio News.